Welcome to Hartford Public Library. My name is Jeffrey Mainville. I'm a programming and events manager here. Hartford Public Library is redefining the role of the urban library in the 21st century as an innovative and educational place to explore and learn, offering a rich array of cultural and academic resources for the people that we serve, and as a venue for discourse on timely issues that affect our community. Tonight's program is part of a larger series of conversations around the library's One Book, One Hartford selection in 2015, James Baldwin's 1974 novel, If Beale Street Could Talk, which speaks of a broken criminal justice system and of family bonds, where passion and sadness are inevitably intertwined. A young man falsely accused of a terrible crime is imprisoned, and two families set out to clear his name. We'd also like to invite you after the program to visit the exhibit, The Road Not Taken, by Hartford Public Library board member Thea Montanez, which shares the stories of incarcerated individuals and gives them a voice, and it's right down the hallway. Tonight we have a diverse group of voices in the room ready to contribute to a conversation about life after prison in Connecticut. And we are grateful for the participants who are here this evening. We have much to discuss, and therefore I'd like to introduce tonight's moderator. Andy Thibault is a former contributing editor and columnist for the Digital First Media in Connecticut, where his decades of experience as an investigative journalist have garnered him the reputation as a tenacious and determined a journalistic warrior that will stop at nothing to ensure equitable legal treatment for the citizens of Connecticut. His second collection of columns on a variety of topics has culminated in his book, More Cool Justice. It's on sale here during and after the program. We'd like to thank our friends from the University of Connecticut Co-op for being here tonight. Please visit the book table at the conclusion of the program. Praise from fellow journalists note that Andy is a maverick, the kind that has the public good and the concept of governmental transparency at the core of his writing. He is a fierce advocate for what he perceives as an injustice. Susan Campbell wrote, "When other journalists moved on from the sad case of Bonnie Forshaw, Andy Thibault stayed put and refused to waver in his reporting, that this was a tragic miscarriage of justice." More recently, Thibault was one of the few reporters to cover the Boston Marathon bombing trial from gavel to gavel. It's been a pleasure to work with him to develop this program, and the library is honored to have him with us tonight. So, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Andy Thibault.
Thanks, Jeff. Thanks to the library. Thanks to all these nice people who showed up. What we have here is real people, real stories, real problems, and maybe even real solutions. We have a mix of public servants who actually believe in public service, and some human beings who have done some wrong and paid the price even while seeking redemption. It's a real pleasure to be with this mix of panelists tonight. I've known some of them for many years, some of them for just a few months. But I'm especially grateful to the state officials who are participating, because they have open minds and they're open to questions, and it's my clear impression that they're striving to make things better. And they're open to mix it up with some of our panelists, and none of the other panelists I believe to be bashful, so it should be pretty good. We're here to kind of take a look at what is Second Chance in Connecticut, proposed by and Governor Malloy and enacted in a bipartisan fashion, which is pretty good these days to get anything done like that. I expect we'll have an energetic and lively discussion and a courteous discussion. It's kind of awkward to say that because I'm not exactly Mr. Manners, but have free speech, but respect the speaker. There will be Q&A, audience if we go too far without getting into the Q&A, but I will recognize people from the floor. And if I could ask our panelists to come up, and then I'll ask them to start introducing themselves. And after that, they can make statements and/or I'll ask them questions. So if you folks could come on up. Well, we have our 4 panelists up here, and we have our 3 panelists, AKA respondents, down here, and we have all you folks out here, and we'll all mix it up. And if we start down the end with Judge Devlin, if you just give a little intro for yourself.
Sure. Good evening, everybody. Good to see all of you. My name is Robert Devlin. I'm a Superior Court judge, and I'd also like to thank the Hartford Public Library for hosting this event. So I've worked around the criminal courts of our state in one capacity or another for pretty much all my professional life. And for the last 20 years or so, I've been a Superior Court judge. And for the last 5 years, I've also had the position of our Chief Administrative Judge of the Criminal Division of our court. Connecticut, I think we should keep in mind, has a long history of innovation in the criminal justice system. It's not a perfect system, but we do have this history, and our branch is fully prepared to sort of implement whatever second chance legislation comes out of the governor's initiatives, and we've done that in the past, but we have a whole array now of really diversionary programs that are designed to do just that. I mean, to allow someone who makes a mistake to sort of overcome it in ways that are hopefully productive. So I'm looking forward to a good discussion tonight. Thank you.
My name is Bonnie Forshaw. I'm the only woman at the time in 1986 sentenced to 45 years for murder. I was released in 2013 clemency. I have experienced a lot over the years, but over the years, what I experienced and the consequences of my action has made me who I am today, to advocate on those who are less fortunate than myself. At the moment, I am involved in speaking out against domestic violence and trying to help those who are being released, because it's difficult. When we are released, we are only given one paper for ID, which is not sufficient when you go to the motor vehicle department. And different changes to prepare a person for a release was never given to me as an opportunity. Therefore, I have to draw back on the support of my family and my friends, and for that, I'm fortunate today. And with that, I'd like to thank everyone for coming out, and I hope you enjoy the meeting.
Thanks, Bonnie. Good evening, everyone. I'm Robin Cullen, and first, I want to talk about being a person who celebrates wellness. And that would be by recognizing myself as a person in long-term recovery. And one of the things that's going on right now that I'm involved with is putting a face to folks who suffer both mental illness and addiction. For the longest time, we've been the anonymous population. Part of that was the design of programs to help us heal. But what's happened is when we are not well, we are recognized as bad people rather than sick. And so it has been my experience that before I got well, I was sick. When I was not sober, I was not well. I wasn't bad. And so we have this idea of good and bad rather than sick and well. And so part of the work that I do in the world at this time is about shifting our minds to recognize people who suffer from mental illness and addiction as people who are not well. And we have a system designed to punish, hold people accountable, and that energy will never produce a person who's well. And so part of my journey has been finding the path to wellness for myself through programming and treatment, not through punishment. I served 3 years at York from 97 to 2000, and I will always know that I have been the facilitator of my recovery. I sought out programming, I found what was available, and I did the work that I had to do to no longer be the person I used to be. Change is possible. What we need are facilities that provide that and a public aware of how things are, and maybe with the opportunity for input for change. We have a system that, like my dysfunctional family, has done the best it could with what it had. But in order to be well, we need change. We need treatment, we need programs. So I am so grateful to be here tonight. I'm looking out in the room and I see people who are definitely open-minded, and panelists here that would not be here if they weren't looking for improvement, change, and a way to be healthier. So I appreciate this time. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Scott Semple. I'm the fairly newly appointed Commissioner of Correction for the state of Connecticut, but I am a 27-year veteran of the Department of Correction, starting as a correction officer and working my way up through the ranks. I've been in the system, working in the system for a very long time, and I was appointed by Governor Malloy in an interim capacity back in September, and was went through the appointment process and became the commissioner officially in March. Thank you to the Hartford Public Library for the invitation. I too see some familiar faces in the room, and I'm very appreciative for your attendance here this evening. In some ways, I may be preaching to the choir, but that's okay. If you're here, maybe you just want to hear it all over again, just to make sure I'm being consistent. But with that all said, it's a pleasure for me to be here on behalf of the agency, and I hope that I have an opportunity to learn from you and my colleagues here at the table, as much as I may share some direction that we're moving this agency in. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Semple. And before we continue with the rest of our introductions, I just want to remark that it's pretty heartwarming to see two contributors to the book written at Niantic, York. Couldn't keep it to myself in between the correction commissioner and the state's top criminal judge. Who would have thunk it, a couple of years ago. And we have 3 more panelist respondents down here. Gary, you want to start?
Good evening, everybody. My name is Gary Roberge. I'm the Director of Adult Probation and Bail Services for the Judicial Branch's Court Support Services Division. I'm in my 28th year with the branch, and I too have held various positions throughout the 28 years. I started off as a line bail officer providing services to the courts. And I'd like to thank the Hartford Public Library and Jeffrey and Andy for the invitation tonight to have this discussion with you all. And I'm hoping to talk a little bit about what our probation officers do with regard to client reentry, and something that Ms. Cullen just brought up around programs, treatment services, and behavior change, right? And the work that we do with our clients. So I look forward to the discussion tonight, and I hope I can contribute in some way, shape, or form. So thank you.
Thanks, Gary.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for being here. Andy, thank you for inviting me. My name is Jeffrey Grant, and I am a prison minister. After serving almost 14 months in a federal prison in Pennsylvania, I came out and was invited to join the board of directors of two of the largest nonprofit, reentry-related nonprofits in the state of Connecticut, Family Reentry and Community Partners in Action. I then attended Union Theological Seminary and got my Master's of Divinity and became a pastor. I served as the associate pastor and director of prison ministries at the First Baptist Church in Bridgeport. And then with my wife and I, Lynn Springer and I, we founded the Progressive Prison Project and Innocent Spouse and Children Project, which is the first ministry in the country to support white-collar criminals and their families. It's a unique proposition for a constituency that doesn't receive a lot of compassion or empathy generally. And we do that work along with our work in Bridgeport and around the state. Thank you very much.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Tracy Bernardi. I was just released after doing a 22-year sentence. I went in when I was 19 years old. I did 7 years straight in segregation. I really have a lot to offer. I probably won't be able to share it all tonight, but I really think that I have a lot to contribute to what changes could be made within the department to help with reentry into society, to help prepare people. But the one thing that I can say is programs that come into the facility, volunteers that come into the facilities, arts programs, education programs, college programs. I was a Wesleyan student before I left. I left with 54 college credits. Things like that are what is needed. And I really feel like those things have helped me. They've prepared me. And I feel like just really, really strongly about the fact that just because somebody is an inmate doesn't mean they're still not a really strong human being that can be somebody and something when they get out.
It's good to hear the applause for all our panelists. I'll start with a question for Commissioner Semple. It might be a two-parter, but Commissioner, you once told me a story of a gentleman who had gotten out and he had to go to an appointment and he was on the bus and he was kind of freaking out because he didn't understand the directions or where to go. And if this fits in context, I know that in a prior position, I'm not sure if it was warden or whatever, you participated in a one-on-one program with inmates where you just talk about stories. I was wondering what you learned from that and if anything applies to the story about the guy on the bus.
So the experience that I had as a warden was through an organization, what is now called the Phoenix Project, and Vivian Blackford is here this evening, who's been leading the cause in that regard. The exposure that the concept was under Commissioner Arnone at the time, and it was an interesting concept because the thing that was so interesting about it is that we were going to have interactions with former offenders, citizens now, that have moved on with their lives and succeeded. And it started out as a roundtable discussion, and then it was a one-to-one discussion with someone who was previously incarcerated and talking to us about what worked during their incarceration. So lessons learned was programs are, well, my interpretation of lessons learned are, programs were okay, and it was good that they exist, but more often than not, it was people who influenced change. And that made me ponder, say, okay, how do we take advantage of that? And so as I moved up through the ranks and I thought about that, when I became deputy commissioner, you get invited to a lot of events and reentry award ceremonies and things of that nature. And I was in Bridgeport, and there I saw all of these formerly incarcerated folks, now citizens, who were getting their degrees, were getting employed, and we were celebrating that success. And I was driving home that evening, and I said, 2 months before I was a warden, and I never saw success. I only see failure, what comes into the system. Failure is probably not the best term to use, but just to keep the story short, only what comes in. And if I'm the warden of a correctional facility, what are my staff seeing? All they see is what comes into the system. They have no idea that they have the capacity to influence other people. So when I became commissioner, I started thinking about how can I improve what we do from a programmatic perspective. And I said, I've thought about my experience in life, and you had mentioned it earlier about education. And I tell this story all the time. I'm going to tell it again. Sorry if you have to hear it again, but I don't remember what I learned in 5th grade. But I remember Mr. Mobilio. And he influenced me. And he cared about me. And I can remember discussions, and I just remember feeling good. I felt there was wellness in my life. And it was because he was a passionate facilitator. So I talked to my staff. I said, programs are great, but passionate facilitation has to occur with what we provide to the population. That is what has an impact. That's how you influence people to make change. And that's a direction that we've been going through our strategic initiatives and the discussions that we have been having and the direction that we have been taking the agency. The story about the particular individual happened in Bridgeport. It was a gentleman who had been locked up for 20 years. And he said, it doesn't have to be complicated. So just think about this for a minute. If you're locked up for 20 years, what does the world look like today? The toilets flush by themselves. You don't have to press a button or turn a handle to wash your hands in a public bathroom. Well, the bus routes have all changed, and the technologies that are associated with them are all changed. So this gentleman was feeling a certain level of anxiety. And he said, you really got to get into the facilities and just do the simple stuff. The things that we take for granted, how to use the phones and things of that nature, how to navigate through wherever you're going to be. And the thing that really hit me hard was this gentleman was in a halfway house, and he was able to obtain a job, and he was going to his job, and he jumped on a bus, and he was lost. And because he was lost, he said, well, now they're going to violate me because I don't show up for my job, and now I got to deal with all that. I'm going to be incarcerated again. I'm going to flee, because that's what he knows. And something made him change his mind. And he went to the bus driver, and he said, I just came out of prison. I'm trying to find my way to this job. And the bus driver said, oh, that happens all the time. I'll help you out. And he shared that story with me. And so I talk about all this dynamic programming and all the things that go with that. And sometimes you just got to go over the simple stuff. And so sometimes it's not as complicated as you think. So thank you for bringing that up.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Bonnie, you've mentioned that you had to go to DMV 6 times to get your ID. Maybe you can tell us what that was like and what some of your fears were.
Well, I felt like I was coming out of prison and trying to get proper ID. I felt like a woman without a country because the paper that was given to me that I was supposed to use to get the ID was not sufficient enough. And thank God for my daughter and knowing her way around. We had to go to we had to start all the way back to Niantic, New London. We had to go there and get a divorce paper with a name change on it. Even with that, we still didn't have enough to say who I was as a person because they was not taking the paper that had a government seal on it as sufficient ID. Therefore, I was with ID. I couldn't get any insurance. I couldn't get anything because I had no ID. And after the 7th trip to the motor vehicle and talking to the supervisor and showing all the sufficient forms that was needed for the ID, I finally was given proper ID to use. And believe you me, if it wasn't for my daughter, I think I would have never been able to get it. Because we lived in Manchester at the time, and going to the motor vehicle trying to get this ID was a daily occurrence. And we went so many times, they became familiar with us. And it was like, please, I have all the credentials right here from my birth certificate down to my name change, marriage license, divorce papers. All I want is proper ID. And the supervisor, with his input, I was able to get it. And let me tell you, that's the most important piece of paper I have to my name. It's like, oh my God, I have proof of who I am. And now I can begin to try and assimilate myself, because before I couldn't. Who was I? Who am I? Every place say ID. I give them all kind of medical credentials with my name on it. Not sufficient. Now that I have it, thank God, I feel like I'm somebody. I can now file applications for apartments or whatever. But without that, I couldn't do anything. And my daughter was doing all she could, and thank God for her, as I say, because I couldn't do it myself. I was lost when I came from Niantic. I was completely lost, still is. I was in Connecticut, but I wasn't in Connecticut because I was incarcerated. I was not prepared for what I see now or what I am in the midst of. But I have to take it one day at a time. With the ID, I could now have my own apartment. I had to go through different programs that I never knew about, but by word of mouth, you go here, you go there, and finally a door opened, and that's how things became about. But my years in Niantic was different from the average person because I was there longer than anybody, even the COs, even the wardens. So being an older person, I had to walk the walk and talk the talk because there was many younger ones that I took under my wing. I was an auntie, I was mama, I was granny. I had quite a few caps that I wore while I was there. But my main thing was I was surrounded by suffering everywhere you look, suffering, everybody's sick. Everybody looking for something but don't know what. And come to find out, the only thing they needed was understanding. The average person wants unconditional love. And this is what I gave them because I was older and I knew more, and I felt like it made my life better by helping somebody less fortunate than me. I wrote letters to families. I helped those that didn't know how to read. I did literacy volunteer to tutor them in getting their GED or whatever. Just to learn to read a simple book was an eye-opener for those who didn't know how to read. I had no interest in reading. I surrounded myself with groups and people that was involved in different groups, because me telling somebody about a group that I hadn't been to was not being straight up and honest. I lead by example. Come on, let's go to this group and see what it's about. Why don't we try this, try that? It was always left up to the person to make the choice. But when the suicide rate kept going up, everybody was at a loss to what to do. That's when I learned about grief and loss. Because see, when you lose a loved one in prison, you don't have time to grieve like you would any other place. There's no privacy. If they see you crying, they want to know what's wrong. It's no sense in telling them because they can't help. So you say, oh, I'm having a rough day today or something like that. When they come to me, it's a different story. Well, what you think we should do? How would you like to go about it? How can I help you? Any way I could, I assist those that was in need, because all of us was in need of something. Whether it was commissary, whether it was an envelope, a bag of chips, I was always available, and I was blessed and fortunate enough to share with those who was unfortunate and didn't have. When I first went to prison in '86, around 1990, we had a new warden. And that's when it was, we was getting Christmas packages, and the staff was upset because there was so much coming in until it was thought of that maybe we should form a group the next year to help settle what was acceptable and what wasn't acceptable to come in for the holidays. There's no holidays really, but yet and still we tried to do the best we could with what we had. My thing was the mothers who came to prison who lost their children without the benefit of having proper representation. I listened to their stories, wiped their tears, I gave them hugs, and I sit down and talk to them and try to give them words of wisdom to help them. But yet and still, the help I gave them was not sufficient enough for them to go about handling the situation with DCF with the children. So we improvised that we have trailer visits for inmates who did not get in trouble. My family was one of the first families that was accepted in that program. And I think that program was not only beneficial for me to be in contact with my family, spend overnight in a trailer visit, to see them and be with them was worth the joy of striving to do all that I could to maintain that, because my family was all I have and was more important to me.
Bonnie, I'm going to cut you off because we got a lot of people, and
All right.
it's all great stuff, but we don't have a lot of time.
Thank you.
Switching gears a little, Reverend Jeff Grant is not alone in pointing out that we have two Connecticut's, rich and poor, white and minority, and what can Second Chance do to help wealthy, low-crime areas, and why should wealthy, low-crime areas care about Second Chance and stuff?
Thank you, Andy. In a way, I think the right way to respond to that question is, why would people from the wealthy suburbs of Connecticut be interested in this topic? Historically, Connecticut's different than our neighboring states in New York and Massachusetts, where there are wealthy cities. In Connecticut, the major cities are poor. They have a lot of minorities and a lot of crime. And whether or not the judicial system is has been focused on those cities or not, there's no question that that's where the press has been focused. And for the most part, people who live in the wealthy, mostly white suburbs, Greenwich, New Canaan, West Hartford, or whatever, they like to think that crime is not in their communities, and it's really exclusively in the cities. So why should we worry about it? Well, I think that there's really two issues. First of all, crime is everywhere. All you have to do is look in the headlines on any given day, and crime is in every single town and every single community, and it's ridiculous for people in these communities to believe that crime doesn't exist there. And second of all, crime and the judicial system and prison reform affects everybody in the state in dramatic ways. I mean, if not for simply for the taxes, which is a big argument that people have made as to the huge budget that is in the Department of Corrections and CSSD to deal with these issues. And second of all, in the fact that there's a basic disproportionate way in which the legislators are willing to address this. Why would legislators from these wealthier communities, dig in and get involved in the prison reform issues unless people in these communities compel them to do it? And that what we've found is that frankly that they've been unwilling to do it. And so what we've been trying to do is to bring it to everybody's attention that this is a problem for everybody, and if the legislators from every district would get involved and advocate for social and legislative change, that we'd be able to make some real impact in this state.
Thank you. Want to move along and make sure all the panelists get to speak and we get some audience involvement. Gary Roberge runs probation. And what does probation do before somebody gets out, and how can they help with housing or jobs?
Sure, thank you, Andy. So what we do is we have a program that's called the Probation Transition Program. And we have approximately 34, 35 officers that work with our clients that are incarcerated and then are going to be released to probation supervision. It's called a split sentence. And what we do is we start looking at that case about 6 months prior to release, and within a 90-day to 120-day period, we will either by way of video conferencing or we'll go into one of the DOC facilities and conduct our assessment process. And what that does is it tells us what obstacles an individual may be facing when they're going to be reintegrating back into their community. And as Andy pointed out, I mean, the big ones that we see are obviously housing's an issue, employment's an issue, and identification is another big issue with our probation clients that we have to work on. So with housing, we have some different options. We have transitional housing that we contract for in the branch. We have approximately 110 transitional beds. It's not a locked facility, and we can use those beds if somebody doesn't have a place to go. We also have supportive housing contracts where there's some case management wrapped into it, and we supply somebody with an apartment for a period of time, and we work to get them employment, and we also teach them budgeting skills and things like that. And then we also have other types of beds, especially for our sex offenders that are being released into the community, because that residency is really an issue with that particular population that we have scattered throughout the state. We have 16 beds that have a case management component that they also work with the individuals while they're in these apartments. And typically, we can transition folks from their apartments by helping them get employment, and other resources into their own apartment in a 6 to 9 month period. So we have some pretty good turnover with that. For employment services, if somebody comes out and they don't have an employment opportunity, we contract with the Alternative in the Community programs that we have throughout the state, and they offer employment groups in which they, do resume writing. They talk about how you should present in an interview. They do mock interviews. They do all types of different employment skill building services with our clients. And then we have a network of employers that we can refer the clients who complete the employment service group to for employment. So we're fairly successful with that program. We're hoping that we can increase the number of individuals that get through that program and obtain employment, because we know that stable housing and a good job are key factors in reducing our recidivism rates.
Thank you. Excuse me, I got a little cough here. Judge Devlin, could you give an example of a technical probation violation and maybe an anecdote or a composite of how you or other judges were able to resolve that short of sending somebody back to jail?
Sure. But let me just comment a little bit on what's
Whatever you
already
want,
been
yeah.
sort of
Yeah.
put on the table here. It might be worth considering having a statute that authorizes the Department of Corrections to issue someone a Connecticut ID card when they release from prison. They know the person. They have their fingerprints. They have the uniform arrest report. They know who Bonnie is here. Why can't they just give her a official Connecticut ID on the day? I mean, that seems to be a... You know, and this issue about why should people in Greenwich care what happens in Bridgeport? This famous author, Dostoevsky, this Russian author, said, you judge a society, you judge all societies by the way they treat their prisoners. You judge all societies by that. And if you're going to be humane and decent and righteous people, you care about what happens in Bridgeport. No matter how you live in some high and mighty mansion down in Greenwich, you still care what happens in Bridgeport. So hopefully there's a certain sort of community of interest here that should be applying this situation. So violations of probation. Gary can speak to this, but I'll just talk about it generally. We have revamped over the last maybe 10 or 15 years the way we deal with violations of probation, because you have a lot of people on probation in Connecticut, like 40,000 people on probation in Connecticut. And some of them do fine, and some of them stumble a bit, and some of them stumble big time. And so it's a question of what sort of protocol should be in place before a case is referred back to court. And basically, our modern probation officers they can sort of increase the level of supervision to address certain concerns that people have. So the case is not brought back to court simply because someone might give up one dirty urine or miss one probation appointment. It's not like that. But we do see people who do fall away from probation, and probation simply needs to have the court's assistance in bringing them back to probation. So for me, it's two things. If someone commits a fairly serious crime while they're on probation, for me, that person's a problem right then and there. Okay, if they're committing a pretty serious crime while they're on probation, they have to go back to jail for a while because they're just not ready for probation. Everybody else, I really try to figure out a way which we can sort of use this violation of probation as a way to maybe route them to a different path to help them out. So we have our jail re-interview program, which takes people who are maybe held in jail, try to get them into a therapeutic environment. We have situations where when someone's on a violation of probation, okay, you're going to be supervised by your probation officer now. You're going to plead to the violation of probation. You come back every month and see me for like 6 months. If you're doing fine, you keep back on probation. And that works. That works a lot of times. If people get them on the right path, it can happen. So violations of probation are something we have to contend with, but they're not all the same. And so we do try to, there's lots and lots of instances in Bridgeport, because I'm presiding judge down in Bridgeport, where people come in on what we call a technical violation. They're not going to jail. They're going back on probation in short order, hopefully with a better chance of making it through their probation term.
Thank you. Robin, you've worked in therapeutic writing groups and dealt with trauma in other ways. How does trauma factor into incarceration and reentry?
How long do I have?
Not too long. The hook is getting sharper.
I know, huh? Just, we were here last week at the library, Judy Doran Performance Project, and we were able to have a little bit of time to perform some excerpts from In My Shoes, some work that I have participated in and many other women who are working on looking at things that have happened in their lives and trying to figure that out. Wally Lamb is here in the audience, and the work that we did with Wally Lamb was about self-reflection, looking back, trying to find out, what might have happened along the way. Last week when we did the performance, there was a woman in the audience who made a comment, and it's something I've been hearing often lately. She said that the question shouldn't be, what's wrong with you? It should be, what happened to you? Because we have this, what we're calling a school to prison pipeline. Our schools are starting to look like mini little correction facilities. We're using punishment, but we're not looking at the family unit. We're not looking at what might be going on. When we look at statistics, 1 in 14 children have had a parent or have a parent who's incarcerated. The statistics are just staggering. I believe it's almost 2/3 of the women who are incarcerated have left their children at home, children that were maybe under the age of 18. And so who's parenting those children? And what kind of trauma is going to now happen in their life? What trauma was happening then? If we look at the women and the men, and I will be working with men soon, but we have that childhood trauma that when we talk about children, we talk about things happening to children. We have compassion, we have empathy, and oh my God, that's so horrible. These children grow into adults, and then we blame them for their behavior that comes out of that trauma. And so one of the things that I do that's a very successful program across the nation and other places that have been studied, we do a group called Healing Trauma. And we talk about the relationship with the self. We talk about triggers. We talk about how to manage our lives. And when we do this, we get the tools we need and the explanation. They're not excuses, but it's an explanation for why people might be repeating patterns over and over. So if we're putting folks into a facility where the environment is not trauma-informed and gender-specific, then we're re-traumatizing and triggering folks, and the only thing they have is reaction. And it's a literal brain track that was created the first time they had trauma. And now we trigger that trauma with the environment, locked doors, the sound of keys, footsteps in a hallway, just all of these types of things. And then women and men get punished further by going to segregation if they reacted to something that was a trigger to their trauma. So there's this whole chain of events happening that has an explanation, and there's a way to manage this. So if we're not looking at trauma treatment, as early as childhood in schools, some of the programs that have been created are about dealing with childhood trauma and, calling it what it is and looking at it because it's real. And people have suffered trauma, and people are carrying this with them their whole lives. And so it seems as though the folks who have fallen through the cracks in our educational system end up filling the receptacle which is being dumped into the prisons, and all of these things still haven't been addressed. And then we have really unhealthy people being blamed instead of giving them offering a helping hand. And it's not everyone, but there are folks who would respond if we looked at it through a different lens.
Thanks, Robin. I have a question for our remaining panelist who is yet to speak, and then I might ask if any panelists have any questions for each other, and then maybe we can open it up. Tracy, can you give an example of something that might be done differently when you're getting ready to go from inside to outside?
Well, one of the things that I think is really important is people don't realize that when we're doing these groups, we're doing our education, we're taking courses, when we start increasing our self-esteem, like what Robin said, when you come into prison, you're traumatized from something. For instance, I didn't join a gang because I wanted to go around beating up people. People think that people join a gang because they want to be cool or they want to be this and that. I joined a gang because I wanted a family that was going to love me and accept me, and I thought that that's what I was getting. But what I didn't know was I was going to get just as abused as I was in the household that I came from. And because that was familiar to me, I thought that was normal. But these people hugged me and gave me that special handshake, and they made me feel like I was a part of something, where my family only punished me, grounded me. So I was confused. I was a kid, And there's studies that show that your brain is not fully developed until you're 25. But these are things that were not looked at until now with the second chance law. But that's not what I'm getting into. What I'm getting into is the fact that when you start getting your self-esteem back and you start doing good and you come back from a Wesleyan class that you competed against 180 girls to get into, and there's 15 girls that get in and you go to walk to your room and a guard calls you a bitch or tells you to get the hell in your cell, you are being re-abused. And you know what? Because the warden's not there or his superior is not there, he can say anything he wants to say to you. They can do whatever they want to do when no one's there. Why? Because you're an inmate. No one's going to believe you. It doesn't matter what you're there for. It doesn't matter that your crime was 22 years ago. You're an inmate. So you're a liar. You're a thief. It doesn't matter if you never stole a thing in your life. It doesn't matter if you never had a false information ticket. It doesn't matter. You have that stigma. This is the problem. The problem is these staff are not reprimanded for their behavior. The higher up staff, the staffs that have higher rank, they will treat you better. They're more professional. But the lower staff, DOC needs to have a tighter grip on them. They need to have better sensitivity training. They need to realize that their behavior toward inmates is going to affect the recidivism rate. It's going to be what breaks down individuals' self-esteem. The minute that we start getting better and we walk back and we're called out of our names, we're called less than we are, then we're being re-abused. We're being re-injured. And maybe you might say, oh, that's not going to hurt you. But when that's what you've been told all your life, when your stepmother told you you're going to go to jail just like your mother when you were a 9-year-old kid, and then you grew up, and that's exactly what you did, when words become true, I rose above it somehow, some way. I rose above the things that came because I had a different mind frame. But some people are not that strong. There was a lot of points in my incarceration for a long time where I was suicidal. I did 7 years in SEG, and one point I almost died during a suicide attempt. But in that moment, I decided that I wanted to live. and I decided that I was not going to help the world punish me. I decided that I had enough, and I decided that I needed to forgive myself for my crime, and I needed to use it to my advantage. That's why I'm speaking here tonight. I needed to help other people. I feel like God preserved me. I'm going to be 43 years old. I feel like he did it so I can talk to kids. I feel like he did it so that I can talk to them. I can tell them what gangs get you. I can explain to them that if they don't find love in their families, they can find it with a teacher. They can find it in community centers. There are people out there that care. You know, I may not know how to use a cell phone that well, but I have tons of Facebook friends. This is my first bottled water since I've been out, so you guys are experiencing that with me. I just really want you to know that change is possible, and just because somebody's in prison, they're not a bad person. They just had experiences.
I guess we're moving along pretty well now. Does anybody on the panel have a question? Yes? What was it? You have a question? Or does anybody on the panel have a question for anybody on the panel?
Is the commissioner going to respond to what was just said? That was a pretty powerful statement.
Well, I think I did in some ways when I talked about the exposure. First of all, you know, one of the things that there are in interactions with people who are in the system, they tell me that there's three types of staff. There's the enforcers. They enforce, are black and white thinkers, the policy driven. Then there's people who have a general caring type of way about how they interact with the inmates. But the ones that are most frustrating are the ones who don't care. And there's over 6,000 employees that I oversee. And I know that there's people who don't care. And I am trying to impact that, not only from the perspective that it's not, you talked about trauma, I use the term wellness. The fact of the matter is, that's not good for them either. So, I mean, I talk about our strategic initiatives, and it focuses around three overlapping guidelines: efficiency, public safety, and wellness as it pertains to trauma. And what's interesting is, I think many of you can know this already, is that the female population seems to be more exposed to trauma than other populations. It's certainly a concern for me, but I can tell you that my legacy is to improve upon that. I am very interested in improving overall wellness within the system. Now, if I had my druthers about IDs, I would become the next AAA. It's interesting that you would think that it would be so much easier to be able to get someone's identification, but you know it's actually pretty complicated. If you were born in Puerto Rico, 1964 or before, they have no records. The federal government's requirements to obtain identification are held to standard up to the DMV. I think every person who leaves the system who wants an identification should have an identification. In New York State, they like the judge had said, that they have a law in place that says the inmate identification is good for 90 days post-incarceration. It's good because you have incarceration. It's bad because that stigma stays with you. And I don't have the answers yet. We are working with other state entities to try to come up with a more formalized way of improving that process. I can tell you that it has improved.
Go ahead.
Do you think that there's a way to improve the inmate grievance system? Because I think that the solution to this would be the inmate grievance system, because the way that it's set up, we have a certain amount of time to get an answer from a superior. So what they do to us is they don't give us the answer within that time limit. So by the time we get the answer, it's too late.
Okay,
It's
yes,
the
we can improve
catch-22.
we
And
call it now administrative remedies. And yeah, we can improve that with modern day technologies. And we are launching something in the very near future that's going to allow for that.
I think Jeff will be coming out with a mic pretty soon. Do we have any questions?
Yeah.
You got the mic,
Yes.
Richard?
Everybody needs.
Questions from the audience? Gentleman up here.
I have a question for Commissioner Semple. There have been tremendous improvements in the reintegration process, especially as it relates to building and strengthening the bonds with families. And I think Cybulski's reintegration unit is a good example of the DOC moving in that direction. The problem is, and I'm wondering if you could comment on this. Many of the ex-offenders or returning citizens that I've spoken with have said that it was much easier for them to actually stay in contact and build on the relationship with their families while they were in prison than when they come out, if they come out to a residential program like a halfway house or an AIC. One told me how I ran into him, and I've known many of them because I've worked with ex-offenders for years, and one told me that it was no problem getting a pass to go out job searching every day from his halfway house, but his mother was sick and he couldn't get a pass to go see his mother. Another one told me that he was risking returning to prison by sneaking off to see his wife and kids for a short period of time. Is there any way that the DOC can have everyone on the same page, that focus on the importance of building and strengthening family bonds can also be made a policy that we expect that the halfway houses and the AICs would also support? Because at the present time, it doesn't seem that your sense of that as a priority, it doesn't seem to be their sense of it as a priority.
So I'm pretty popular tonight.
You're in the hot seat.
Yes, the answer is yes, and the way to do that is through contract compliance, and right now that's a work in progress. I do know that there are some issues with continuity of expectations that exist within our partner providers. There's a lot of redundancy that exists between what the system does for the population and what occurs with our partner providers. We have a unit in place that is gearing itself up to be able to improve the overall level of continuity. But I mean, I agree with you, is that we have recently met with the commissioner and her staff for the Office of Early Childhood Development, and I had asked her to come in and assess what we do, and which would be inclusive of what goes on in the community, to see if we could have a positive impact on the interactions that have to occur as far as family unification. Because you said it best, that the likelihood of someone who's the offspring of someone who's incarcerated is far greater for them to be incarcerated as well. I'm judged by recidivism rates, but I really want to make it as a generational impact. And that is very, very important to me in terms of what I do. There are some initiatives that are going on now. I'm not sure if we're going to have the time to talk about it. If we do, I'll share with you some things about brain development and things of that nature. But
I think the commissioner has earned a little bit of chill time. Questions for anybody else on the panel from the audience? Gentleman up front here.
Thank you for all of you coming down. My question is dealing with the data. In my spare time, I like to look at the public data, and every data I look at it in is very depressing in Connecticut. Last night I looked at it in the prison population, and 66% of the prison population in Connecticut are either black or Hispanic. And out of that 60% of them are male. And my question is, almost, if you go any court in Connecticut, you go, almost everybody who's being processed, majority of them are black or Hispanic. And then somehow I don't see the message getting to them. In this room, if you look at it, and I don't see a lot of Hispanic male or black male in the room. And that's most of them who are either in prison population or either who are on probation. Majority of them are there. Is there a way somehow to get that message, to get to these, so they know these programs or they hear these powerful speakers in here? And a lot of places when I go, I don't see that. And a few months ago, Michelle Alexander, the author of the New Jim Crow book, came in, and it was the same data she was talking about. It. So my question is, how the message is going to be reached to it? If you go to that next room, the library, almost everybody in there see the black or Hispanic, but somehow, the message is not, and they're not hearing these powerful messages in here. Thank you.
Anybody want to respond to that?
Here we go again.
No rest for the weary.
So, my focus is on reentry, and I think that if we can have the population is dropping. It's happening for two reasons: there are less juveniles coming into the system, and we're getting an aging population, and age is a big predictor in recidivism. And if we did nothing, the recidivism rate would drop, but that's not what we're going to do. So that's the back end, the reentry end. So I'm probably not the best person to respond to this. I'm not sure if there's anyone up here who can, but my focus is on reentry, and with the savings, and I know that there's been a lot of discussion about justice reinvestment. There's a no entry component to that has to occur, and I think that's where you're going. So I'm all on board with any cost savings that come out of our current budget because of reduction in population and improvement in recidivism on the front end for a no-entry plan.
Gentleman over here.
Good afternoon, everyone. Good evening. It's good to see all you guys interested in our community. That's beautiful. And I'd just like to say to my auntie, that's my auntie and godmother out there, how you doing? How you doing? It's my godmother. And it comes back to what they were saying about, we don't have lack of communication, because I see this room and I don't see enough of our people in this room to understand what's going on in our environment. And we need to address those issues, because the simple fact is lack of communication is a breakdown of communication in our community and our states. And we need to address that issue, because if I wouldn't know about this meeting, it was from my constituent right here. He keeps me informed, but I didn't see nothing, no media, no kind of advertising or no kind of discussion on this meeting. And I think that's the problem that we need to discuss within our community about what's going on in our community and about our people that's coming back in the reentry program. I just like to say to y'all that I'm an activist in the community, and I'd like to know what kind of drug programs do y'all have for these inmates that's coming back out, because drugs plays a big part of why a lot of our people are incarcerated, mental illnesses. So we need to look at it from the core. And a lot of our kids are coming from these troubled families that is doing this. So we need to try to stop it at the seed, at the root of the problem. So if any of you guys can shed some light on that. And I like what you said about, you show me what kind of community or what kind of environment we have by how we treat our inmates. And we need to start treating our inmates with more dignity, as she said, and addressing the issue also with the staff that's at hand. That needs to be addressed as well, because a lot of staff comes in with attitudes and they take it out on the inmates, which is not fair to the inmates. So we have a lot of issues to discuss, and we got to go back to our family and to our neighborhoods and let them realize that we need to, we all need to be accountable for what's going on in our neighborhood. Thank you.
Thanks. If I may just extract a couple of the points you made. One is, I think I heard you say something like you'd want to have more community involvement and a follow-up on these topics, and I know the library is open to that. Second Chance isn't that old. I'm sure there will be more forums throughout the state. And another point you made is what kind of drug rehab programs are there? Gary, could you speak to that?
Absolutely. So in the judicial branch, what we have available to us for our clients, and especially those that are reentering from a correctional facility, we have different levels of treatment. We're very fortunate. I have to say we're very fortunate in Connecticut to have the resources that we have. I was just at a meeting last month with my colleagues from around the country. Actually, every state was represented, and we were having lunch one day with maybe 10 or 12 directors of probation. And they were amazed at the services that we do have here. So I'll talk a little bit about that. We have approximately 350 residential treatment beds, okay, for substance abuse, and some of those are for individuals with co-occurring disorders, so if they have mental health issues, as well as substance abuse issues, we have residential beds for those individuals. And then we have what we call adult behavioral health contracts throughout the state, and it's a clinical level type of treatment, and they provide outpatient drug treatment and intensive outpatient treatment. And then we also have a general education type of drug program at our alternative in the community centers that's called Treating Addiction Disorders. So depending on where our clients are at with regard to their level of need for drug treatment, we do have 4 different levels that are very effective. And we do know that the individuals that we can engage and make certain that they finish their programs, that we have more success with for their probationary period. So I think you're spot on with the point you're making, and that's a description of the programs that we offer in the branch.
Gary, let me follow up a little bit. Suppose you're in Hartford and you want to get into one of these programs. How do you do that?
The probation officer simply makes a referral. We have 3 providers here in Hartford. We have Wheeler Clinic, Catholic Charities, and Hartford Behavioral Health. So the probation officer will make a referral to the program. The client will go to the program, have an assessment evaluation completed by the clinician at the program. We'll send the information back to the probation officer as to the appropriate level of care, and then they'll be placed in a program. And if for whatever reason they're struggling and they're having problems and they're an outpatient, we will then, as Judge Devlin was talking about before on the violations of probation, we're not going to violate somebody for a dirty urine right off the bat if they're in a drug treatment program, right, an outpatient program. We call it graduated sanctions. We're going to up the sanction to an intensive outpatient program. And then if they continue to have issues with the intensive outpatient, we'll look to get them into residential. So we'll really try to work with our clients as best we can to get them the appropriate level of care.
Thank you.
And yeah, I can speak to that a little bit as well. We've got this, in fact, Dr. Catherine Maher, who's a physician with the Department of Corrections, spearheaded this. We've got this program in Bridgeport that's been up and running for about maybe 6 months or so, I think. What we're trying to do, this is sort of the other end of the process, the very beginning end, but someone gets arrested and their principal problem is drug addiction. That day, the day they're arrested, that day, they don't go to jail, they go to a treatment facility that day. And we've got about 40 some odd people in that program right now, and it seems to be working out actually quite well. And the model now, the modern model, is you combine sort of drug counseling with medicine, and you try to sort of help the person. It's not just the counseling, there's a medicinal component to it. But we had a couple of guys who had gone through the program successfully. And so at this luncheon, I asked them, well, how come you guys have kind of made it through this? And we see other people that struggle, and they back and forth. And one of the guys simply said, look, you got to want it. I mean, you got to want it. And if you want it, I'll tell you, if you want it, we have the tools to help you get there. We really do. We have the tools to help you get there. It's a matter of convincing people that it's really in their own personal best interest to do it. But so it's a you have to help the person, they have to help themselves, but they can't do it on their own. And we also realize, like Gary said, that people, it's not a straight line. I mean, it's not, people can go back and forth and back and forth. So hopefully it's a line heading in the right direction, but not always a straight line. And one more point, which I'll say briefly. And this goes to what Ms. Bernardi said a moment ago. When I was a young prosecutor, they gave me the job to go up to the Sentence Review Division, which basically reviews sentences that people can have another chance to have their sentence reviewed. And so I was probably 28 years old going up to, they used to have a little courthouse, a little courtroom in Summers Prison back then. And inmate after inmate would come out and they'd have their ask for some reduction in their sentence. But the theme that came through to me more than anything else was what stuck with, these are all men, what stuck with these guys more than almost anything else were the harsh words that the judge said about them. The really harsh words. It really hurt them a lot. More so than getting a sentence for probably, what they thought was, reasonable sentence under the circumstances. So you're right. I mean, we train judges. We're involved in judicial training, and we emphasize that with our new judges. You have to really very much be careful because language counts, and people really are affected by it. So that's a very good point. Thank you for making that here tonight.
Andy, can I comment on that? Andy? Over here. Can I just comment on that?
Yeah, and then we'll have this later.
What's been on my mind is the performance work that we do with Judy Dworin. Years ago, I worked with MAD for about 10 years, and Janice Heggie got us to every kind of training where anybody in the system was working because she thought they needed to hear from us what our programs were so the judges would send people to them through MAD. And I was thinking that the work we do, the performance work, where women share our stories, all this information that gives the human perspective for us to perform at the judges' training, even if it's not a full-out performance, but excerpts, so that actual people who are well, who have done what is offered through, so that we can replicate what's already being, happening and create more of that. But getting to the judges' training so that judges across the board can see that people do change. Because it's been my experience that not all judges are on that page. And so, that's part of the problem. And, just maybe giving evidence in front of them to hear actual people who are successful. Just like that same idea that if we don't see what success looks like, then we don't know that it's possible. So just a suggestion. Sure. I'd love to maybe talk further about that.
Sure.
Glad you jumped in, Robin. Other panel members, if you want to react, jump in as well. We have a question from a woman up front here, and then one or two people in the back after that.
Sure, thank you. Good evening. So I currently volunteer with a group of inmates at Cheshire Correctional Institution. They're the Lifers group. They're men that are serving life sentences, meaning 25 years or more. They produce the exhibit in the next room. It's 17 profiles of these men as children, and they talk about who they were, and it's this idea that we are more than the worst things we've ever done. So I've been helping these men create a space to do community outreach. Recently, they took money off of their books and collected $600 and donated it to the Connecticut Food Shelter. So they are philanthropists as well. But the majority of them are convicted murderers. They're mostly black and brown men that are between the ages of 38 and 44. They are sentenced to 50, 60, 70, 80 years. And I'm curious, with second chances are a big focus on nonviolent offenders, but what are we doing with our violent offender population? I don't know if anybody can speak to that.
That's a very good question. Someone had mentioned before about, I think it was a gentleman in the back, about dignity and hope. And despite that you may technically be spending your life with us, you still deserve to have some level of dignity and hope. And I think that we need to make sure that that's reinforced and injected into what we do. A sentence is a sentence, and so we're going to have to manage that. And the obligations of that sentence is what I do. But with that said, there are opportunities for people to do good things even though they may be behind bars, and that's okay. I think we have to accept that. So your example is a great example. I've seen countless examples of that when I was the warden at the Garner Correctional Facility, and the tragedy, the storm that hit New Orleans. The whole population, anyone who had money donated money, and we donated it in their name. And I think you'll be surprised that despite the circumstances of an event, people still continue to be kind. And if people are going to be, can't hear me? Okay. I think it's important that we have an obligation to be accountable to people who are accountable to themselves. And that's where hope and dignity comes through. So, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Hi. Just quickly, I want to get back to the substance abuse. Are there, and I guess I'm asking the prisoners, and I don't want to put you on the spot again, Commissioner, because I think you've been there, but how much are we doing when the prisoners are still there? Are we letting enough meetings, and are we letting them get treatment so when they come out, they don't have to start all over again? And I know there's some meetings that go on in the prison, because I know people that go in and run them, but I hear from them that it's very difficult. The numbers are very, very small. So how can we improve on that?
So there's waiting lists for essentially every program that we have in our system. We have a bunch of tier programs that we do for substance treatment. One of the things that's more interesting that we're doing, in fact, I was just at the meeting today, we obtained a grant, and what we're trying to do, it's a collaborative grant with Yale and the Department of Mental Health and Addiction Services, and what we will be doing is injecting in-reach programming for people who are close to returning back into society. And the background on this tells us that if you begin that process on the back end of the sentence and the engagement process begins, the recidivism rate drops drastically. And it's a combination, as Judge Devlin had said, and again, this is through our Dr. Maurer, who's been doing some very innovative things to try to do some things that we're not used to, methadone programs and things of that nature. This is all new to Connecticut. So these are different things that we're doing, but the engagement piece of that results in individual counseling with what they call MAT, medication-assisted therapies. And that will be introduced here in Connecticut in the very near future as a result of that grant. Then we'll measure that study and decide how we're going to apply it within the system itself.
Thanks. We're running out of time, 6 or 7 minutes left. I know there's a couple more questions back there. Tracy, do you have a brief add to that?
Yeah. The one thing that people don't focus a lot on is long-termers. Long-term inmates, a lot of the programming for long-term inmates, they say, you can't have vocational courses because we'd rather give them to people that are leaving right away. But a lot of the people that are leaving right away are the main ones that contribute to the recidivism rate. They don't use the programs anyway. But if you're talking about hope and dignity, the things that long-termers need are things that give them hope and dignity. Becoming certified in culinary arts, actually being able to eat food in culinary arts that you made, learning how to cut hair, having a job in cosmetology, cutting hair, doing these things, being told that you have to have 8 years left on your sentence to do these things, that's a hard one, you know? Being told that and another thing is pay rate. You're being paid 75 cents a day, and your cosmetics, they have, the prison commissary is a monopoly because it is one company that sells you everything. So you have no choice where you buy what you buy, but you're making 75 cents a day. So if you make $5.25 a week and you want to buy a toothpaste and a soap, you can't buy food because you need your toothpaste and your soap. So these are things that need to change, especially for long-termers, because you're staying in prison your whole life. So dignity is not being 42 years old and having to depend on your family because you work all day long for 75 cents a day.
Okay, thank you. Got a couple people, yeah.
How's everyone doing? My name is Henri. My question is basically dealing with finances, because when you come home from prison, be it short term or long term, one of the biggest issues is money. You do programs, you do anything, transportation, whatever you may need to do in life. It costs. And when you come home, let's say you even get a job, it takes you relatively 2 weeks just to get a paycheck. Now, let's say you got to do programs. You may have a program where you have to pay. Now, that begins to weigh on a person's brain. Now, this person begins to move through life thinking that he has to pay this, that, and the third, and they may have a time window where you have to have this money in. But we also know that you have this record behind you. So now you go out into the world, and now they have the block the box situation going on, which is a great thing. So what ends up happening, you go into the world and you go looking for a job and things of that nature, you go to participate in these programs, but your psyche is already beating you in the head saying, I don't have the money to do this. So my thing is like, what are we doing besides long-term people who end up with gate money? What are we going to do to sit over here and make sure, individuals are not just walking out into the world looking for an opportunity to get $1 in their pocket? What are we going to do to ensure the fact that, when they reach out into the world, that they're going to be able to say, okay, I don't have to worry about the finances to that degree, say like with the programs, what you were saying, the grant. With grant money, that allows a level of freedom. That allows a level of saying you don't have to pay that much. But we want to get to the point where it's program helpful, but not pocket hurting. You understand me? So if anybody can address that situation, especially with probation and, the commissioner as well, because that like intertwines itself.
So there are burdens on folks, whether it relates to restitution fines, child support, all of the things that go with that. There's a lot of discussion with regard to that, because you're right, it is a huge burden, and it's not to anyone's benefit to why go do this, why be law-abiding if this is what this is what I'm up against, and I'm sure there's an argument for it in many ways, but I can talk to you just briefly about what we did more recently here. And since I've been in this role, April 20th, we opened up a reintegration center. We renamed the Cybulski Correctional Institution to the Cybulski Community Reintegration Center. What we envision doing there and have been doing there is giving people the skills, vocationally, educationally, employment opportunities and things of that nature while they're with us. This opportunity to bring home a salary, go to work in the daytime, come back in the evening, go to programs. That opened on April 20th, a 600-bed facility. Right now there are 2 units open. We're going to York late fall this winter. Next we'll go to the Manson Youth Institution. And then I hope to develop a hybrid version for the mental health population, because I'm very passionate about that through my experience in my previous positions. In addition to that, we're also going to be focusing on trying to impact recidivism on 2 fronts. One is what we measure today, and then there's a population that's responsible for the highest rate of return. It's the 18 to 25-year-old population. You mentioned it with brain development. We want to inject brain development curriculum into the system, separate that population from the adult population, and try to make an impact on all of the aspects of brain development that go along with that. Oftentimes, that 18 to 25-year-old population is impulsive. It's all related to the notion of brain development, but they're also subject to manipulation. And So we think that we can have an impact on two fronts. And that I think, directly correlates to not only reducing the overall recidivism number, but may also impact it on a generational perspective, which I think is the way to go.
I'm sorry.
I've been told we're at a wrap. Do we have a little?
Please let Mr. Rubin.
Yeah.
Okay. Briefly, so with our probation clients, we have something called the Basic Needs Program at our Alternative in the Community programs. And what that does is for individuals, and I can appreciate your point, and we deal with this issue each and every day. With the Basic Needs Program at the AIC programs, we do, if somebody is going to be employed doing carpentry, we have the ability to buy tools for the person, to buy boots. We do provide transportation with bus tokens. So we try to limit what's coming out of the client's pocket while they're trying to get back into the workforce. Now, as far as the programs and paying for the programs, typically all of our program services that we contract for in the judicial branch are fully funded, and our clients do not have to pay a fee. There are a couple of programs in which there are fees and there are sliding scales. So if, depending on the person's ability to pay, and if they can't pay, they're not required to pay. So that's how we try to address that issue. It's not a perfect system, and I understand your point, but that's what we try to do to limit the exposure on the financial end to our clients.
I think we'll have to do this again in some fashion, maybe broaden the base. And bring in some legislators who have the power to change a few things. And it's nice to hear a judge quote Dostoevsky. You've got a real diverse crew of human beings trying to improve the quality of life, and it's nice to see them working together. And Jeff will give you a good night, and thank you for participating.
I'm just going to say, let's please a round of applause for all our folks up here, and Andy Thibault. So thank you all for your time, and Hartford Public Library, thanks you all for coming this evening.